Judge mocks Karoline Leavitt in court until she pulls out her Secret Service badge. The wooden gavel landed with a dull thud, silencing the murmurs in the small Concord, New Hampshire courtroom. Judge James Carter, a stocky man with thin-rimmed glasses, adjusted them on his nose as he scanned the papers before him. This wasn't a high-profile case, just a routine zoning dispute, but the presence of one particular defendant had drawn some extra attention. Seated at the defendant's table was Karoline Leavitt, the 27-year-old White House press secretary. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, her blonde hair neatly tied back, she exuded a composed professionalism. Though she was no stranger to New Hampshire, today she wasn't a political figure or a spokesperson. She was just another citizen caught in a legal battle. Judge Carter cleared his throat, his tone laced with sarcasm. Ms. Leavitt, according to the records, the house you built on the eastern side of your property exceeds Merrimack zoning limits. The authorities are well within their rights to demand you adjust it or tear it down. He looked up, a smirk forming. I assume you'd like to argue otherwise? Karoline leaned forward slightly, her hands resting on the table. Her voice was steady, firm. That house belongs to my family, Your Honor. It doesn't disrupt anyone, and frankly, I don't believe the government should have the power to dictate what I do on my own land. A few chuckles rippled through the courtroom. Judge Carter, enjoying the moment, let his smile widen. Ms. Leavitt, the law applies to everyone, he said mockingly. Whether you work at the White House or appear on TV a few times doesn't change that. The laughter grew louder. Some locals even clapped, savoring the sight of a high-ranking government figure being put in her place. But Karoline didn't react. She let them have their moment. Then, with slow precision, she reached into her suit pocket. A courtroom deputy instinctively stepped forward, his hand hovering near his holster. But Karoline didn't pull out anything dangerous. Instead, she placed a small silver badge on the wooden table in front of her. The overhead lights caught its surface, illuminating the engraved words. The room went dead silent. Judge Carter's smirk faded as he squinted at the badge. What is this? He stammered. Karoline leaned back, crossing her arms, her gaze cool and commanding. That's a United States Secret Service badge, Your Honor. Her voice was calm, but every syllable carried weight. And it means I've handled matters far beyond zoning regulations. Judge Carter paled. His hand trembled slightly as he pushed his glasses up and leaned in for a better look. He wasn't a fool. He recognized an authentic badge when he saw one. The kind issued only to those who had operated in the deepest, most classified corners of national security. A hush fell over the courtroom. Carter swallowed, struggling to regain composure. Ms. Leavitt, are you saying you're not just a politician? Karoline didn't blink. I'm more than what's in your file, Your Honor. The weight of her words settled over the room like a heavy fog. Carter's mind raced. He'd heard whispers, rumors about certain public figures with pasts that weren't meant to be uncovered. But Karoline Leavitt, a young high-profile political figure tied to something like this? He glanced at the deputy, who looked just as stunned. The audience, once amused, now sat stiffly, their initial excitement replaced by uneasy curiosity. Carter shifted in his seat, his confidence shaken. Ms. Leavitt, what exactly are you doing in a small town like Concord? A faint smile crossed her lips, but it was devoid of warmth. I just want to live a quiet life, Your Honor. Her tone was soft, yet the meaning behind it was unmistakable. Carter studied her carefully, realization settling in. This wasn't just a simple zoning dispute anymore. The woman sitting before him wasn't merely a politician fighting over land. She was something else entirely, something he wasn't prepared to challenge. His chair creaked as he sat rigid, his mind struggling to process what had just unfolded. The courtroom air felt heavier, as if the very gravity of the situation had shifted. The badge still sat on the table, gleaming under the ceiling lights. Not a prop, not a trinket, but a symbol of something far greater than he had anticipated. He looked up at Karoline, who remained silent, her piercing blue eyes locked onto his, waiting for his next move. Judge Carter had no idea who he was dealing with. until it was too late. Judge James Carter had always been a man of certainty. He prided himself on his ability to read people, to hold his ground. But this moment, this woman, felt different. He cleared his throat, trying to steady himself. "Miss Leavitt," he began cautiously, his voice quieter than before. "I had no idea about your connections." Karoline Leavitt's lips curled into a slow, deliberate smile. "Not many people, do, Your Honor?" Carter hesitated, then picked up the badge she had placed before him. It had weight, not just physical, but symbolic. He had seen Secret Service credentials before, but this one was different. The insignia, the serial number, this wasn't standard issue. This belonged to something much more classified. After a long breath, he set it down. "I take it your role in the government isn't widely publicized." Karoline leaned forward slightly, her face unreadable. "You could say that." The judge studied her, unease creeping into his gut. "I've heard rumors," he admitted, his voice measured, "about certain people. People with pasts best left buried. But you, I assumed you were just another young politician who liked being on TV." Karoline let out a quiet chuckle, but there was no warmth in it. "You think politics is just cameras and speeches?" Carter hesitated, feeling like he was being drawn into something far beyond his jurisdiction. "I never really thought about it that way. Most people don't." Karoline straightened, tapping her fingers lightly on the table. "The truth is, I'm good at two things: talking and handling difficult situations. One gets me attention. The other? That's duty." Silence stretched between them. The air in the courtroom felt heavier, thick with unspoken meaning. Carter shifted in his seat, grasping for control. "So what does this mean for the case? Because whatever your past is, Miss Leavitt, zoning laws exist for a reason." Karoline nodded as if she expected the challenge. "I'm not asking for a favor, Your Honor, just understanding." Carter arched an eyebrow. "Understanding?" Her voice lowered. "That house isn't just a house, it's a safe house." Carter's pulse ticked faster. "A safe house?" He narrowed his eyes. "For whom?" Karoline held his gaze. "Have you ever heard of Project Sentinel?" The name meant nothing to him. "Should I have?" Karoline's faint smile didn't reach her eyes. "No, that's the point." Carter drummed his fingers on the bench, his legal mind struggling to piece this together. "Let's say I believe you. Let's say that house is tied to national security. Why let it come to court? Why not handle it through the proper channels?" Her expression darkened. "Because the people who were supposed to protect me are the ones who want me gone." A chill ran through him. "Gone?" Karoline nodded. "Old programs have a way of resurfacing, Judge. Sentinel was one of them. It wasn't supposed to exist. But when you work in the shadows long enough, you learn one thing: nothing stays buried forever. Now someone's trying to clean house. And if they take down that house..." She exhaled slowly. "It won't be long before they come for me." Carter swallowed hard. This wasn't a zoning dispute anymore. This was something else entirely. Something that had just turned his small courtroom into a battleground for forces he didn't understand. He flicked a glance at the door, half expecting men in black suits to burst through. "Miss Leavitt, you're asking me to ignore zoning laws based on things I have no proof of." Karoline's fingers traced the edge of the table. "I understand, Your Honor. You have a job to do. But you need to realize, this isn't just about my land. It's about what comes next." Carter frowned. "And what exactly comes next?" Karoline leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "A war. One that's been simmering for a long time. And now, it's about to explode." The weight of her words pressed down on him. He had walked into this courtroom expecting a routine case, a ruling on an overbuilt house. Instead, he found himself standing at the edge of something far bigger than he ever imagined. And for the first time in his career, Judge James Carter wasn't sure he would make it home safely. The case had just become a war judge. James Carter barely had time to process Karoline's words when a sharp knock at the side door startled him. The deputy stepped in, leaning down to whisper, "Sir, there's a federal agent here. Says it's urgent." Carter stiffened. He cast a glance at Karoline, who remained as composed as ever, then turned back to the deputy. "Which agency?" "Homeland Security," the deputy murmured. "He says you'll want to hear what he has to say." Carter hesitated. A federal agent showing up in the middle of a zoning dispute? That wasn't just unusual. It was impossible to ignore. Across the room, Karoline's lips twitched with the faintest trace of irony. "I told you, Your Honor, you're in deeper than you think." Carter exhaled sharply, then gave the deputy a nod. "Let him in." The door swung open and a tall man in a black suit stepped inside. He moved with quiet authority, the kind that didn't need to be announced. Late 30s, sharp-eyed, carrying the unmistakable air of someone used to being in control. Judge Carter. He flashed a badge. "Agent Daniel Foster, Department of Homeland Security." Carter studied him warily. "I assume this isn't a coincidence?" "I'm afraid not." Foster's gaze shifted to Karoline. "Leavitt." Karoline inclined her head, her voice cool. "Foster." There was history there. Carter could hear it in the silence that followed. Then Foster stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Your Honor, I need you to clear the courtroom. Immediately." Carter glanced at the spectators and court staff, who were already shifting in, their seats sensing something was wrong. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the gavel, striking it once against the wood. "Clear the courtroom. Now." Murmurs spread through the room, but no one argued. Within moments, the door shut behind the last person, leaving only Carter, Karoline, and Agent Foster. Foster turned back to the judge, his expression unreadable. "You need to understand something. Karoline Leavitt isn't just a politician. She's not just some face on TV. She was involved in things that were never supposed to exist." Carter folded his arms, his mind racing. "Enough with the riddles. Agent, tell me what's going on." Foster reached into his coat, pulling out a thin file. "This," he said, handing it over, "is what you're dealing with." Carter flipped it open. His breath caught. Grainy surveillance photos. Some old, some recent. Black and white images of Karoline alongside figures whose names had been wiped from public records. Intelligence reports stamped classified. Satellite images of burned-out sites in remote regions. And then, the bodies, lined up in the snow, like discarded chess pieces. Carter's fingers hesitated on the last page. A name, bold and unmistakable. Victor Kane. His throat went dry. "Who the hell is Victor Kane?" Foster sighed, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "He's the one cleaning up Sentinel's loose ends. And if he knows Karoline is still alive, then your courtroom just became the front line of a war you didn't even know existed." The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. Carter's world had been confined to legal disputes, land ordinances, and zoning laws. But now, he was staring at something far bigger and far more dangerous. His stomach twisted as he turned. Another page, more photos, more reports, and then finally, the truth. "Victor Kane," Carter muttered, staring at the name. He looked up at Foster. "Who is he?" Foster's face was grim. "A ghost, at least he used to be." He exhaled, shaking his head. Kane was one of Sentinel's best operatives, until something changed. Maybe it was greed, maybe ideology, or maybe something personal. But when Sentinel was disbanded, Kane didn't just disappear like the others. "What did he do?" Carter asked. Foster's eyes darkened. "He went independent." Carter frowned. "You mean, a mercenary?" Foster nodded. "Worse, he built an empire, selling classified intel, running black market operations, taking contracts that no one else would touch." Carter scanned the reports again. Political assassinations, corporate sabotage, covert warfare, the kind of work that governments never acknowledged but always feared. And now, he was erasing Sentinel's history. one loose end at a time. Carter set the file down, his hands tightening into fists. "And Karoline?" Foster's expression didn't change. "She's the last loose end." Silence filled the room. Judge James Carter had walked into his courtroom today expecting another ordinary case. Instead, he had just been handed a war and, for the first time in his career, he wasn't sure he'd make it out alive. No more illusions. Carter glanced at Karoline. She had been silent throughout the entire exchange, sitting with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Not a flicker of emotion crossed her face. He turned back to Foster. "And you think she's on his list?" Foster let out a dry laugh. "Your Honor, she's not just on the list, she's at the top of it." Carter exhaled heavily, rubbing his temple. "Good Lord." Finally, Karoline spoke, her voice as steady as stone. "Why now?" Foster looked at her, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. "That's what we're trying to figure out. Sentinel was buried deep. There's no reason to dig it up unless—" He paused, leaning against the desk. "Unless someone's trying to restart it." Carter frowned. "Restart it? You mean bring the program back?" Foster nodded. "Think about it. Sentinel was one of the most effective covert operations. In history, illegal, sure, but effective. No bureaucracy, no oversight. Just highly trained agents eliminating threats before they could form. If someone wants to reboot it under private control, the first thing they do is eliminate anyone who could expose the truth." Carter looked at Karoline. "And that's why you built that safe house." Karoline gave a faint smile. "I always knew the past might come knocking. I just didn't expect it to kick the damn door in." Carter let out a dry, humorless laugh. "So what now? You expect me to just brush off this zoning case like nothing happened?" Foster shook his head. "I don't care about the zoning case, Your Honor. But if you turn your back on Leavitt, you'll be giving Kane exactly what he wants. He's watching. He has eyes in places you wouldn't expect. If this court rules against her, if she loses that property, she'll be vulnerable. And that's when they'll strike." Carter sighed. He had spent his entire career believing in the law, in order, in rules. But this was something else entirely. He looked between the two people before him. "And if I agree? If I let her keep the safe house?" Karoline answered first, her voice cold. "Then you'll live a little longer." Carter narrowed his eyes. "Is that supposed to comfort me?" Karoline met his gaze, slow and steady. "No. It's just the truth." Carter leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping against the desk. "I'm thinking of recusing myself from this case entirely." Foster's face darkened. "That won't help. If you step away, someone else will take over. Someone without the advantage of this conversation. And if they rule against Leavitt—" He let the thought linger. "This whole town could become a battlefield before you even realize it." Carter swallowed hard. He'd never shied away from tough calls. But this wasn't just tough. It was terrifying. Finally, he exhaled. His voice was quieter now. "Let's say I don't push Leavitt into danger. What stops them from coming after me next?" Foster glanced at Karoline before answering. "Nothing." Carter's stomach tightened. Karoline leaned forward. "The difference is now you know they're coming. That means you can prepare." Carter let out a shaky breath. "And if I refuse?" Foster's tone turned icy. "Then you'll be the next name on their list, Your Honor. And no one will know why." A heavy silence settled over the room. Carter looked down at the file again. The photos of the dead, the places that no longer existed, and an organization erased from history. For the first time in his life, he realized the law couldn't protect him, and for the first time, he was truly afraid. Nowhere feels safe. The sun had nearly set by the time Judge James Carter pulled into the driveway of his small home on the outskirts of Concord, New Hampshire. Usually, the winding road through fields and woods brought him a sense of peace, a quiet escape from the weight of the courtroom. Tonight, it felt different. Tonight, it felt empty. exposed. He shut off the engine and stepped out, but the crisp northeastern air did nothing to ease the tension in his chest. The day's events replayed in his mind like a bad dream. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just some rising politician fighting a petty land dispute. She had a past so dark and so secret that the government had buried it long ago, and now someone was digging it up, piece by piece. Starting with the people who had been part of it. A voice cut through the stillness. "Took you long enough." Carter spun around, his heart hammering against his ribs. Karoline Leavitt leaned against his porch, arms crossed, eyes glinting in the fading twilight. She still carried that same sharp, unreadable expression from the courtroom. "Good Lord, Miss Leavitt," Carter muttered, pressing a hand to his chest. "Are you trying to give me a heart attack?" Karoline's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, one devoid of warmth. "If that scared you, Judge," she said, stepping forward, "you're not ready for what's coming. No safe harbor trespassing." Carter's voice was flat, but Karoline didn't flinch. She took a step closer, her gaze locked onto his. "You could try." Her tone was almost amused. "But right now I'm the only thing standing between you and the people who want to see you 6 feet under." Carter stared at her, searching for something, anything in those piercing eyes. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" The faint smile on Karoline's lips vanished. "No, it's supposed to make you listen." Carter exhaled, rubbing his temple before gesturing toward the house. "Fine, come inside. But if you're about to drop another bombshell, at least let me have a drink first." Inside, Carter poured himself a stiff whiskey and took a long sip. He gestured toward Karoline, but she shook her head. "I don't drink when I'm expecting trouble." She settled into an old armchair, posture relaxed, but her eyes stayed sharp. Carter raised an eyebrow. "Habit from your other job?" Karoline nodded. "Let's just say it's kept me alive longer than most." Carter leaned against the kitchen counter, exhaling slowly. "All right, Miss Leavitt, start talking. You've made it clear this is bigger than a land dispute. And after what Agent Foster showed me today, I'm inclined to believe you. But what I don't get is, why now? Why Concord? And why me?" Karoline tapped her fingers lightly against the armrest, her gaze momentarily distant. Project Sentinel was buried for a reason. It was too dangerous, too uncontrollable. It made more enemies than allies. Someone wants to restart it, and they're willing to kill anyone who was ever involved to make sure no one can stop them. Carter set his glass down, his voice tightening. "Fine, but what does that have to do with me?" Karoline's expression turned cold. "Because you made a mistake, Your Honor. You laughed at the wrong person in the wrong courtroom. That told them you didn't know who I was." Her voice lowered, deliberate. "And that makes you the perfect pawn." Carter frowned. "A pawn for what?" Karoline leaned forward, her voice grave. "Kane's testing me. He wants to see how I'll react, whether I'll fight or back down. He's watching, listening. If I had just accepted your ruling without pushing back, he'd know I was weak." Carter let out a dry, humorless laugh. "And instead, I've been dragged into a war I didn't even know existed." Karoline nodded. "That's right." Carter ran a hand through his hair, his mind spinning. "Good Lord, what do I do now?" Karoline stood, adjusting her coat. "For starters, lock your doors, cover your windows. If something feels off, trust your gut. And don't hesitate." Carter swallowed hard. His voice was hoarse. "It's that serious?" Karoline met his gaze, her eyes heavy. "It's worse than that." A tense silence filled the room, pressing down on Carter's chest. Then, a sharp crack split the air. Before Carter could react, Karoline moved. In a single swift motion, she grabbed him and yanked him to the floor. The front window shattered. Glass rained down. A bullet embedded itself in the wall behind them. Carter's ears rang from the sudden explosion of sound. His breath came fast and ragged. What the hell? Another shot. This one slammed into the wooden floor inches from his hand. He scrambled back, heart hammering. "Get down!" Karoline's voice was razor sharp. Carter barely had time to react before she returned fire. 3 controlled shots, precise and deadly. The cracks of her pistol echoed into the night. Silence. Then the distant roar of an engine. Tires screeched. The attacker sped off into the darkness. Karoline remained crouched, gun raised, eyes locked on the broken window. She listened. Waited. Nothing. She exhaled slowly, lowering the weapon. Turning to Carter, she tucked the gun back into her coat. Welcome to the world of Sentinel. Carter stayed on the floor, his pulse pounding in his ears. He looked around his wrecked living room. The shattered window, the bullet hole in the wall, glass glinting on the hardwood. Just hours ago, he'd been a judge handling a simple zoning case. Now he was dodging bullets from an enemy he couldn't even see. Running a shaky hand through his hair, he swallowed hard. Good Lord, Miss Leavitt. What have I just been dragged into? Karoline gave a faint smile, devoid of humor. Your fight for survival, Your Honor. Carter stared at the destruction around him, at the cold wind rushing in through the broken window. For the first time in his life, he felt utterly powerless, and for the first time, he truly understood fear. Through the shattered window, Karoline studied the pitch-black night, her gun still steady in her grip. She hadn't flinched when the shots rang out. Carter swallowed hard, his voice unsteady. Miss Leavitt, do you know who they were? Karoline didn't take her eyes off the darkness. If I had to guess, probably Kane's people. Could be local hired hands or professionals. She finally turned to him, her gaze sharp. Whoever they were, it means we're out of time. Carter ran a hand over his face, his fingers trembling. Good Lord, you were right. They're really hunting you. And now they know I'm involved too. Karoline nodded. You're officially a liability to them now, Your Honor. That means they'll come back. Her words hit Carter like a stone sinking in his gut. He had spent his life believing in the power of law and order. But this wasn't law, this wasn't justice. This was survival. He struggled to his feet, knees still weak. All right, what do we do now? Karoline holstered her gun and moved toward the broken window, scanning the empty street. We move. Right now. Carter frowned. Move? To where? She was already heading for the door. Somewhere they won't expect. Carter let out a dry laugh, hollow and humorless. Safe. I bet that doesn't exist anymore. Karoline glanced back at him, her expression unreadable. It does. But getting there won't be easy. Carter hesitated. He wasn't used to this. He was used to control, to making decisions from the judge's bench. But now he was just a man trying to survive a game he didn't understand. Exhaling sharply, he clenched his fist to stop the trembling. Fine, he said, his voice rough. Let's go. Karoline stepped outside first, scanning the dark road beyond the quiet suburban house. The night was too still. The faint smell of gunpowder still lingered in the air. Carter followed, locking the door behind him. Not that it would stop anyone determined enough to get inside. Where are we going? His tone was skeptical. Karoline didn't answer immediately. She walked to the gray sedan at the end of the driveway, popped the trunk, and pulled out a small bag. Carter caught a glimpse of an encrypted phone, a stack of papers and what looked like a tracking device. Finally, she turned to him, handing him a scrap of paper. Boston. Carter blinked. Boston? What's in Boston? Karoline's reply was curt. A man named Michael Hayes. If he's still alive, he'll have answers. Carter stared at the paper. The name meant nothing to him. But then again, nothing about this made sense anymore. He looked at Karoline. And if he's not? Her lips twitched, her gaze cold. Then we're already too late. The drive was long, silent and tense. Karoline gripped the wheel with practiced ease, eyes flicking between the road, the rearview mirror, and the headlights behind them. Carter sat beside her, trying to stay calm. The whiskey he'd downed earlier had worn off, leaving behind only a dull headache and the gnawing weight of reality. After a long silence, he finally spoke. Tell me about Michael Hayes. Karoline didn't take her eyes off the road. One of the best. Surveillance, infiltration, cleanup. If something or someone needed to disappear, he was the guy they called. Carter shifted uncomfortably. And you trust him? Karoline let out a dry laugh. I don't trust anyone, Your Honor. But if Hayes is alive, he's been watching us by now. Carter frowned. What do you mean? Karoline tapped the dashboard lightly. People who worked in Sentinel don't get caught off guard. If he's alive, he knows we're coming. That didn't make Carter feel any better. Then why are we even looking for him? Because he's the only one who might know what Victor Kane is planning. Her voice was even, firm. Carter sighed, rubbing his temple. I can't believe I'm caught up in this. I'm a judge, Miss Leavitt, not a mercenary. Karoline cast him a sidelong glance. You're still breathing, aren't you? Carter narrowed his eyes. What's that supposed to mean? She smirked. It means you're in this fight whether you like it or not. Carter shook his head, his voice unsteady. This is insane. Yesterday I was worried about property lines. Now I'm running for my life with a former government operative. The smirk faded from Karoline's face. Her voice was colder now. You think this is just about me? About Sentinel? Carter's stomach twisted. For the first time he realized, whatever this was, it was much bigger than either of them. You have no idea how deep this goes, Karoline said, gripping the wheel tighter. Kane's not just cleaning up the past, he's gearing up for something bigger. Carter frowned. Like what? Karoline's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. That's what we're about to find out. A few miles behind them, a black SUV rolled silently down the highway, maintaining just enough distance to avoid suspicion. Inside, a man in a dark suit watched Karoline's taillights through tinted glass. He lifted a phone, pressing a single button. They're moving. His voice was calm, professional. The reply came instantly, cold. Take them now. A pause. No, the man said. Let them run. It'll be easier that way. He hung up, eyes still fixed on the road ahead. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The highway stretched endlessly, cutting through fields and forests of the American Northeast. Outside, the night was thick with silence, the kind that only came in the deepest hours before dawn, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Inside Karoline's car, Judge James Carter was beginning to understand a terrifying truth. There was no going back. In a matter of hours, his life had unraveled, from handling land disputes in a courtroom to dodging bullets in his own home. The law, the thing he had built his life around, suddenly felt useless. There were people who lived beyond its reach. Karoline Leavitt was one of them, and now, by some cruel twist of fate, so was he. The dense forests of New Hampshire faded behind them, and Boston came into view, its lights flickering on the horizon. But despite the city's presence, Carter had never felt more exposed. He glanced at Karoline. She hadn't said a word since they left his house. She drove with the precision of someone who had done this 100 times before, her eyes constantly shifting between the road, the rearview mirror, and the skyline, always searching for a threat. Carter exhaled, breaking the silence. Miss Leavitt, say something. Karoline didn't react. He pressed on. How did you end up in this life? Her lips twitched, but her eyes stayed on the road. You really want to know? Carter sighed. I'm not sure, but I might as well know what I'm getting into. Karoline stayed quiet for a moment before answering. I was recruited young, special projects, things that never made it into the books. Sentinel didn't have ranks or titles. We were just the ones who got things done. No one knew our names, and it was supposed to stay that way. Carter swallowed hard. But people know your name. Karoline let out a soft, bitter laugh. Yeah, that's what made me useful. Who would suspect someone who'd been on TV of working in the shadows? Carter shook his head, staring at the road ahead. So all this time you were what? A ghost? Karoline's smirk faded. A ghost? She let the word hang in the air. But ghosts don't stay buried forever. There's always someone who wants to dig them up. Carter rubbed his temple. And now Kane's the one digging? Looks that way. He sighed. And this Hayes guy? He's going to help us? Karoline smirked. Hayes doesn't help people. He survives. If he's alive, he knows we're coming. That means one of two things. He's ready to talk or he's already packed up and gone. Carter frowned. And if it's the latter? Karoline tightened, her grip on the wheel. Then we're running out of time. They reached Boston just as dawn broke, pulling into a quiet suburban neighborhood. The houses were modest, old but well kept, the kind of place where people still left porch lights on at night and trusted their neighbors. Karoline slowed as they approached a single-story house at the end of a cul-de-sac. The curtains were drawn tight. The porch light was off. Carter frowned. You sure this is the place? Karoline nodded. Hayes always liked to keep things low-key. For a moment, they sat in silence, watching the house. Then Karoline unbuckled her seatbelt. Stay here, Carter scoffed. No chance. I'm not sitting here while you knock on some dangerous guy's door. Karoline glanced at him, expression unreadable. Suit yourself. They stepped out cautiously, approaching the walkway. Karoline knocked twice, firm but not aggressive. No response. She knocked again, still nothing. Carter shifted uneasily. Maybe he's not home. Karoline shook her head. He's here. Carter frowned. How do you... A sharp click cut him off. The unmistakable sound of a gun cocking. Hands up. The voice was low, calm, and undeniably dangerous. Karoline didn't flinch. Hey, Hayes. She said it like they were old friends. Slowly, they turned. Standing in the driveway was a man in his 50s, lean, wiry, sharp-eyed, and armed. His eyes never stopped moving. The gun in his hand rested at his side, relaxed but ready. Karoline, Michael Hayes said, his voice deep, heavy with the weight of someone who had seen too much. You've got some guts showing up here. Karoline smirked. People keep telling me that. Hayes's gaze shifted to Carter, sizing him up. And who's this? The suit? Judge James Carter? Karoline answered. He got dragged into this by accident. Hayes let out a dry chuckle. Tough luck, Judge. Real tough luck. Carter exhaled, voice unsteady. I'm starting to figure that out. Hayes studied them for a beat, then sighed. All right, get inside. But if this is a trap, I'll put you both down. Karoline gave a faint smile. You're welcome to try. Inside, the house was exactly as Carter had imagined. Bare, impersonal, lived in, but not lived with. No family photos, no sentimental touches. Just an old sofa, a table, a few chairs. The windows were covered, the walls empty. This wasn't a home. It was a hideout. Hayes set his gun on the table, poured himself a glass of water, and turned to Karoline. All right, spill it. Why are you here? Karoline sat, resting her elbows on her knees. Sentinels coming back. Hayes raised an eyebrow, but nothing else. He took a slow sip before answering. Not funny, Karoline. Not a joke, she said. Someone's cleaning up the loose ends. I'm still breathing, which means they're still hunting. Hayes exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. Damn it, I should have seen it sooner. He set the glass down, rubbing a hand over his face. A few weeks ago, I caught some weird activity, encrypted messages popping up on old channels. Thought it was just noise, but now... He turned to Karoline. You sure they're after us? They took a few shots at the judge's house last night. Hayes whistled low, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. That's one hell of a hello. Carter crossed his arms, tension lacing his voice. I don't consider getting shot at part of some game. Hayes smirked. Then you'd better learn fast, Your Honor, because you're in it now. The room fell silent. Then Karoline spoke. Victor Kane's the one pulling the strings, isn't he? Hayes didn't answer right away. He took another sip, set the glass down, then nodded. Yeah, and if he knows we're talking right now. A noise outside. The crunch of tires on gravel. Hayes's face darkened. Damn it. Too late. Karoline, moved first, gun in hand in a heartbeat. They found us. Carter felt his stomach drop. Good Lord, what now? Hayes chambered around, his voice ice cold. We fight. Outside, black SUVs rolled to a stop. Tinted windows reflected the glow of the streetlights. The engines hummed, low and predatory. Then the doors opened, and men in tactical gear stepped. Out, weapons ready. The hunt had become a battle. Inside, Karoline moved with the precision of someone who had been here before, too many times. She kept her gun low but ready, eyes flicking between Hayes and the window. Judge James Carter stood frozen. His breath was short, uneven. He had spent years in courtrooms deciding the fates of others. But now, fate wasn't something he was presiding over. He was in it. Hayes peered through the curtain, gun tight in his grip. They're not moving yet, waiting for us to slip up first. Karoline nodded. Kane's people don't rush. They calculate, they watch, then they hit. Carter swallowed hard. So, what do we do? Karoline glanced at him, voice calm. We make them regret showing up. Hayes let out a dry chuckle. Still that stubborn streak, huh? Karoline didn't answer, just turned back to the window. Outside, the men moved, slow, deliberate. Suppressed weapons, no markings, Hayes muttered. Professionals. Karoline exhaled. Doesn't mean they're better than us. Hayes tightened his grip. Hope you're right, Karoline. Because we're about to find out. Then, a dull thud at the front door. Not a knock. A test. Checking. And just like that, the waiting was over. The door was reinforced. That would buy them a few seconds. Maybe. Then a deep voice called from outside. Leavitt, we know you're in there. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Carter felt a chill crawl up his spine. That voice was too calm, too controlled. Karoline didn't flinch. They always say that before things get messy, she muttered. Hayes smirked. Then let's give 'em a little something, huh? Before Carter could react, Hayes raised his gun and fired through the front window. The blast echoed through the small house, glass shattering outward. A cry of pain followed. The first shot had found its mark. Then all hell broke loose. Suppressed, gunfire rattled in bursts, tearing through walls, shredding furniture, sending dust and debris flying. A quiet house had become a war zone in seconds. Karoline moved fast, staying low, returning fire with sharp, controlled shots. One bullet hit. Its target, an enemy outside, crumpled with a choked groan. Carter dove to the floor, hands over his head. Good Lord, Hayes reloaded, grinning despite the chaos. Welcome to the real world, Your Honor. Another volley of bullets ripped into the house. Karoline grabbed Carter's collar, yanking him back. We can't get pinned down here. We've got to move. Carter stumbled after her, adrenaline flooding his veins. Move where? Out. Hayes fired one last shot before following. Gotta be quick before they bring something heavier. As if on cue, a metallic clank sounded outside. Hayes's face darkened. Grenade. Karoline reacted first. She shoved Carter into the back hallway just as an explosion ripped through the front of the house. The shockwave sent debris flying, furniture collapsing, the last of the windows shattering. Carter hit the ground hard. His ears rang. Everything was noise and chaos. Then, Karoline's voice sharp and clear. Get up, Judge. We're not dead yet. Carter pushed himself up, legs trembling. Good Lord, they're serious. Hayes coughed, brushing off dust. You bet they are. Karoline reloaded. Back door, move. Carter hesitated. And go where? Karoline met his gaze, eyes steely. Anywhere but here. They bolted. The alley behind the house was empty. For now. Karoline took the lead, weaving through narrow streets with instinct honed by experience. Hayes followed, gun still raised. Carter staggered behind, struggling to keep up. You two do this a lot, he panted. Hayes chuckled. More than we'd like. A shout from behind. They're running. Gunfire erupted again. Bullets struck brick and metal, ricocheting dangerously close. Karoline spun, fired 2 quick shots. One pursuer dropped, the other ducked for cover. Keep moving. They cut through another alley, then another. Boston's streets were still asleep, oblivious to the violence in the shadows. Karoline's eyes locked onto an old sedan parked near a side street. She yanked the handle, locked. Hayes stepped up, pulled a knife from his belt and jimmied the lock open in seconds. "Old habits die hard," he said with a smirk. Karoline slid into the driver's seat. "Get in." Carter hesitated. "You know how to steal cars, too?" Hayes clapped him on the shoulder as he climbed into the back. "Judge, I think you're starting to get it." Carter muttered something under his breath but got in. Arguing was pointless now. The moment the doors shut, figures appeared at the alley's end. "Hold on," Karoline warned. She slammed the gas. The sedan lurched forward, tires squealing. Shots rang out, but the car vanished into Boston's early morning mist. They didn't stop until they reached the city outskirts, turning onto a deserted dirt road. Karoline finally eased off the gas, exhaling deeply. Hayes leaned back, voice light. "That was fun." Carter glared at him. "Fun? I nearly got my head blown off." Hayes grinned. "Welcome to the club, Your Honor." Karoline twisted in her seat, her expression dead serious. "Hayes, we need answers. Now." Hayes nodded, rubbing his temple. "Yeah, I get it. If Victor Kane's making moves, we need to know why." He took a slow breath. "And I think I know where to start." Carter frowned. "Where?" Hayes hesitated. "There's a guy. A name." He exhaled. Then he said it. A name that chilled the air. Edward Grayson. Carter looked between them. "Who's Edward Grayson?" Silence. Then Karoline answered, voice quiet, grim. "The last person you ever want to meet." Hayes's face darkened. "He was our handler, back when Sentinel operated in the shadows." Karoline tightened her grip on the wheel, her expression hardening. "And if he's still alive, he's the only one who can tell us what Kane really wants." Carter exhaled, his voice dry. "Great. Another ghost from the past." Hayes smirked. "You're getting the hang of it, Judge." Karoline started the car again. "Then let's find him." The hunt wasn't over. It had only just begun. The dirt road stretched ahead, swallowed by the morning fog. The stolen sedan rattled over the uneven terrain, its old engine groaning with every pothole. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Karoline's hands were steady, on the wheel, eyes locked on the road ahead. Carter sat in the passenger seat, still trying to process the night's chaos. In the back, Michael Hayes rested a handgun on his knee, gaze fixed out the window. Carter finally broke the silence. "Edward Grayson, you said he was your handler, meaning he was your boss?" Hayes let out a dry laugh. "Boss? Nah. Grayson wasn't the type to give direct orders. He was the one who made sure the job got done, no questions, no mistakes." Carter frowned. "And now?" Karoline spoke for the first time in a while, her voice low but firm. "If Grayson's alive, he knows more than anyone. He saw every angle of Sentinel, the missions, the people, the fallout. If Kane wants to bring it back, Grayson's the key." Carter rubbed his temple, sighing. "So where do we find him?" Hayes reached into his coat and pulled out a crumpled scrap of paper, tossing it into Carter's lap. "Last place he was seen, deep in the Catskills, some town no one's ever heard of." Carter unfolded the paper, reading the name aloud. "Hollow Ridge, New York." He let out a dry laugh. "So we're driving into the middle of the mountains to find a ghost?" Karoline smirked. "Not the first time. The drive was long. By the time they reached the New York border, the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the empty highways. Hollow Ridge wasn't on most maps, and as they ventured deeper into the Catskills, the world around them grew more isolated. When they finally rolled into town, twilight had settled in. The place was unremarkable, just a handful of old houses, a gas station, a roadside diner. A town where people kept to themselves. A town where strangers weren't welcome. Hayes peered out the window. Grayson always liked spots like this. places where the past doesn't exist. Karoline pulled into the gas station lot, cutting the engine. We start asking around. Someone here knows where he is. Carter frowned. And if he doesn't want to be found? Karoline smirked. Then we make him show himself. The gas station was run by an older woman who looked like she'd been there since the place was built. A half-burned cigarette dangled from her fingers as she eyed them suspiciously. Karoline approached the counter, her voice calm. "We're looking for someone. Edward Grayson." The woman exhaled a plume of smoke, barely reacting. "Never heard of him." Hayes chuckled. "Funny. Because we were told he's been living around here for a while." Carter, standing back, saw it. The flicker in her eyes. She was lying. She knew something. Karoline sighed. "Look, we're not here to cause trouble. We just need to talk to him." A long silence stretched between them. Then the woman muttered, "Try the diner, don't say I sent you." Karoline nodded. "Appreciate it." As they stepped outside, Carter shook his head. "You really think he's just sitting in a diner?" Hayes smirked. "If I were him, I'd pick the safest spot in town, where the coffee's hot and the exits are clear." The Hollow Ridge Diner was a relic of a bygone era. Its neon sign buzzed faintly. Vinyl booths were cracked with age. The air carried the scent of burnt coffee. It was nearly empty. A tired waitress wiped the counter. And in the far corner, a man sat alone. Carter knew instantly. Even before Karoline. And Hayes approached, he knew. Edward Grayson. His once dark hair had turned mostly gray, his face lined with wrinkles. He wore a simple flannel shirt and jeans, blending in. But his eyes, sharp, calculating, hadn't changed. He didn't look surprised. He just sighed and took a slow sip of coffee. "I wondered when you'd show up." Karoline slid into the booth. Across from him, Hayes beside her. Carter hesitated before sitting next to Karoline. Grayson set his mug down, exhaling. "You were always too stubborn to die, Leavitt." Karoline smirked. "I could say the same about you." Grayson chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, let's get this over with. Guess we're all ghosts now," Hayes muttered. Grayson leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "We need answers, Grayson. Kane's moving. He's hunting us." Grayson's expression darkened. He cast a quick glance at the waitress before turning back. To them. "Not here." Karoline nodded. "Then where?" Grayson stood, tossing a few bills onto the table. "Follow me." He led them out the back of the diner, down a dirt path to a small house on the edge of town. Inside, the place was simple but orderly. Old maps and papers scattered across a wooden table, a rifle leaning against the wall. Grayson sank into a chair, rubbing his temple. "So, you want to know what Kane's up to?" Karoline met his gaze. "We need to know how far he'll go." Grayson sighed. "Kane's not just cleaning up Sentinel's past. He's rebuilding it." Carter frowned. "I thought Sentinel was buried for good." Grayson smirked, his gaze distant. "Buried? Sure. But things like that never really die. The story unfolds in a modern America, where the line between public truth and hidden secrets is blurrier than ever. From a small courtroom in Concord, New Hampshire, where Judge James Carter once dismissed Karoline Leavitt as just another polished politician, to the moment she revealed her U.S. Secret Service badge, the journey proves that a person's past often holds more than meets the eye. From a flight out of Boston to a desperate chase through Hollow Ridge, from facing Victor Kane's relentless hunters to tracking down Edward Grayson, a ghost from Project Sentinel. This is a world where power, technology, and conspiracy intertwine with everyday life. Details like the encrypted phone in Karoline's, the gunfire in the night, or the wary eyes of Hollow Ridge locals mirror today's America, an era where privacy is eroded by surveillance, and trust in the system is constantly tested by unseen forces. The lesson? Never underestimate people, based on appearances. Be ready for surprises because, like Carter, who once mocked Karoline, you never know when your survival might depend on someone you least expect. We live in an age where information and technology can mask unseen threats, cyber warfare, political, deception, and power plays happening behind closed doors. Caroline's ability to outmaneuver Kane isn't just about brute force, it's about sharp instincts, quick thinking, and using the right connections at the right time. The guarded nature of Hollow Ridge's residents is another reminder that trust is hard-earned. In a nation as complex as the U.S., sincerity and patience are essential to breaking down barriers. A few takeaways. Listen more than you judge. Always have a backup plan, like Caroline's safe house. Learn to read between the lines in everyday life, because as Carter discovered, even the most ordinary day can be the start of an unexpected war. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next chapter in Karoline Leavitt's battle against the ghosts of Sentinel. We'd love to have you along for the ride. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video to find out if Judge Carter makes it out alive.